The grand auditorium of Concordia Space Station hummed with the quiet murmurs of dozens of species. Holographic displays shimmered around the central podium, where Professor Eris Thorne adjusted his notes. At 73, Thorne remained imposing, tall and lean with silver hair that caught the light, deep-set eyes that had witnessed humanity's greatest triumph since first contact 3 decades ago. As Earth's premier historical scholar, he had spent his life documenting humanity's journey among the stars. In the third row, Lyra of Xylos sat with perfect posture, her iridescent skin reflecting subtle blues and greens when she moved. Young by her species' standards, merely 90 Earth years, she represented the new generation of galactic scholars. The Xylosians were renowned throughout known space for their peaceful civilization that had never known internal warfare, a point of both pride and evolutionary distinction. The emergence of human civilization, Thorne began, his voice carrying easily through the acoustically perfect chamber, followed a trajectory unlike most council species. Our isolation on Earth shaped not only our biology, but our social structures and technological development path. Holographic images materialized. Ancient cave paintings, early tools, the first cities rising along river valleys. The diverse audience watched with scholarly interest. Ambassador Kalen of the Volan Trade Confederacy stroked his facial tendrils thoughtfully. Captain Eva Rostova, Earth's military attaché, maintained her practiced stillness in the back row. The journalist Zin, a methane breather in an environmental suit, recorded everything with implanted sensors. By the 20th century, humanity had developed global communication networks, rudimentary space travel, and unfortunately, weapons capable of planetary devastation, Thorne continued. This is precisely where your historical narrative becomes fundamentally implausible. Lyra's voice cut through the presentation, firm and clear. The auditorium fell silent. Thorne paused, turning toward the Xylosian scholar. "I beg your pardon?" he asked, his tone professionally neutral. Lyra rose, her slender form seeming to elongate as she stood. "With respect, Professor, I have spent the last decade studying comparative species evolution, and the level of internal violence you attribute to humanity defies statistical probability and evolutionary logic." Murmurs rippled through the audience. She activated her own data display. "The historical records you've presented detail centuries of continuous warfare, systematic torture methods, genocide, and ultimately weapons designed for total planetary destruction used against your own species. Such behavior is not merely aberrant. It's evolutionarily impossible." Ambassador Kalen nodded appreciatively at her boldness. The Xylosian raises a valid point. How could any species survive such self-destructive tendencies long enough to achieve spaceflight? "I propose," Lyra continued, her confidence growing with the support of murmurs, "that human historical archives have been systematically exaggerated, perhaps as psychological weaponization to establish dominance upon entering galactic society. Your mysterious rapid rise to military significance since first contact would certainly benefit from such intimidation tactics." Captain Rostova shifted her weight almost imperceptibly, the only sign of her discomfort. Zin's recording appendages quivered with excitement at the emerging conflict. Thorne set down his presentation materials and approached the center of the stage. His expression remained composed, but those who knew him well could see the tension in his shoulders. "You believe we fabricated the Holocaust, the World Wars, nuclear devastation, that billions of deaths and centuries of suffering were propaganda?" His voice remained steady, but carried a new weight. "I believe," Lyra replied carefully, "that what you call history contains statistical anomalies that demand scrutiny. No other known sentient species has survived such levels of internal violence. It defies evolutionary mathematics." Thorne was silent for a long moment. The tension in the room thickened. "Very well," he finally said, straightening. "Perhaps a more fundamental approach is needed." He turned toward the holographic controls. "Station AI, access Earth historical archives, Prehistory Visualization Series. Authorization Thorn, Epsilon, 927. The lighting in the auditorium dimmed as a new holographic display engaged. Suddenly, they were no longer in a sterile academic chamber, but surrounded by the primordial wilderness of ancient Earth. To understand humanity, Thorn's voice echoed around them, we must first understand the crucible that forged us. The holographic simulation transported the audience to a sweeping vista of prehistoric Earth. The gravity simulation subtly increased, pressing the aliens in their seats. Earth's gravity, 2.2 times. That of Xylos, Thorn explained. Our atmosphere, oxygen-rich and highly combustible. Our geology, violently active with tectonic movement, volcanic eruptions, and extreme weather patterns unknown on most Council homeworlds. The simulation shifted to showcase ancient predators, saber-toothed cats stalking prey, massive short-faced bears, packs of dire wolves. Many attendees flinched at the visceral hunting scenes. While the Xylosian homeworld evolved with minimal large predators and abundant resources evenly distributed across habitable regions, Earth was a battleground from the beginning. Resources clustered in defensible territories. Extreme seasonality created cycles of abundance and deadly scarcity. Lyra watched with growing unease as the simulation depicted early hominids, small, vulnerable creatures in a landscape dominated by faster, stronger predators. Our earliest ancestors weren't the apex predators. They were prey, Thorn continued. Unlike most council species who evolved as dominant life forms, humans developed under constant threat of extinction. The simulation showed a small band of early humans huddled together, using fire to ward off prowling predators in the darkness. Our neural architecture, our stress responses, our social bonding, all developed under conditions of persistent existential threat. Tribal cohesion wasn't merely beneficial, it was essential for survival. Those who could not form strong group bonds and defend territory died. Those who could not innovate weapons died. Those who could not coordinate violence effectively died. Ambassador Kalen's tendrils had gone still, a sign of intense focus in a species. Captain Rostova nodded almost imperceptibly, recognizing the military foundations being described. The simulation advanced, showing tribal warfare over water sources during drought periods, crude spears and stone axes wielded with desperate ferocity. The first human tools weren't created for art or construction, Thorn noted as the hologram displayed a sharp flint blade. They were weapons. The first human chemistry wasn't medicine. It was poison for hunting. The first human social hierarchies weren't civic governance. They were war bands. Lyra's expression had grown troubled. But other species evolved under harsh conditions without developing such extreme internal violence. Indeed, Thorn agreed. But they evolved with different physiological advantages. Krellin toxic skin secretions. Volan regenerative capabilities. Mrissi hibernation cycles. He gestured toward the holographic humans. We had none of these. What we developed instead was cooperative violence as a survival strategy. The ability to identify threats and eliminate them through coordinated action. The simulation shifted to early human hunters working together to bring down a mammoth, their primitive weapons requiring perfect coordination and timing. The same neural pathways that allowed us to cooperate in hunting also enabled warfare between groups. The same tool-making that created hunting weapons created implements of war. The environmental pressures that forced innovation in survival also drove innovation in conflict. The holographic display advanced through human development, the first permanent settlements rising alongside defensive walls, early metallurgy producing both agricultural tools and superior weapons, mathematical advances applied to both irrigation systems and ballistics. And here, Thorn said as the timeline accelerated, we encounter the paradox that shaped human history, conflict as the engine of progress. The hologram now displayed ancient civilizations rising and falling through conquest, Sumerian chariots, Egyptian war machines, Roman legions marching across continents. Each major technological breakthrough in human history was either driven by warfare or immediately adapted for it. Bronze working, iron smelting, steel production, all revolutionized for weapons before tools. Mathematics developed for trajectory calculations and defensive architecture. Chemistry advanced through incendiary weapons and poisons. Medicine progressed primarily through treating battle wounds. Ambassador Kalin interjected, surely artistic and philosophical achievements existed alongside and were often funded by the spoils of conquest. Thorne completed. The Athenian Golden Age, the Renaissance, even our Enlightenment period, all occurred within societies structured around military power and often financed by imperial wealth. The simulation continued its relentless progression, showcasing the rise and fall of empires through conquest, Alexander's campaigns, the Mongol hordes sweeping across Asia, colonial powers dividing continents. The gunpowder revolution accelerated everything. Thorne continued as the hologram displayed cannon fire, decimating medieval castle walls. Suddenly, the capacity for violence expanded exponentially. Warfare became industrialized. The imagery shifted to the Industrial Revolution, factories producing both consumer goods and weapons on unprecedented scales. The audience watched with growing discomfort as the timeline approached the 20th century. What you're about to witness, Thorne warned, is what scholar Lyra suggested could not possibly be real. The hologram erupted into the mechanized slaughter of World War I. Trenches filled with mud and bodies, poison gas drifting across battlefields, machine guns cutting down waves of soldiers. 8 million dead in 4 years, Thorne stated flatly. And merely a prelude. Some audience members shifted uncomfortably as the simulation depicted the rise of fascism, concentration camps, and the industrialized genocide of the Holocaust. The medical experiments, the systematic dehumanization, the efficiency of mass murder, all rendered in unflinching detail. 17 million civilians systematically murdered based on ethnicity, religion, and political affiliation. Thorne continued, his voice maintaining its scholarly detachment, though his eyes betrayed deeper emotion. And simultaneously, the development of technologies that would change our world. Radar, jet engines, rocketry, nuclear physics, all accelerated by the demands of global conflict. The hologram culminated with the blinding flash of atomic explosions over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Many in the audience flinched or covered sensory organs. By 1945, humanity had developed the capacity to destroy itself entirely, Thorne said. And what followed was perhaps even more remarkable. We didn't. The display shifted to show the Cold War era. Nuclear arsenals growing, proxy wars erupting across continents, but the main powers locked in a precarious balance. What scholar Lyra finds statistically impossible actually occurred. Mutually assured destruction, or MAD as we aptly named it. For decades, we lived knowing that human civilization could end within hours. Children practiced hiding under desks to survive nuclear attacks. Families built bunkers in their gardens. Every diplomatic misunderstanding carried the risk of global annihilation. Captain Rostova's expression had darkened with the memories of stories passed down through her military family. Lyra had remained silent, her earlier confidence replaced by visible distress. But surely evolution would select against such self-destructive behavior. She finally asked, her voice quieter now. Evolution works across vast time frames, Thorne replied gently. Our technological development outpaced our biological evolution. We created godlike powers before we developed the wisdom to wield them. He paused. And yet, we survived. How? And the journalist asked, breaking journalistic neutrality in fascination. Not through any great moral evolution, Thorne admitted, but through the shock of discovering we weren't alone. The hologram shifted to first contact imagery, the massive alien vessel appearing in Earth orbit, the panic and wonder that followed, the tentative communications. Learning that we existed in a mostly peaceful galactic community changed human perception profoundly. Suddenly, Our internal conflicts seemed as petty as tribal warfare in the face of cosmic vastness. The existential fear that had driven our weapons development found a new focus, protecting Earth from external threats rather than ourselves. The display showed Earth's rapid transformation after contact. Military technologies repurposed for space exploration, defense systems reoriented outward, global cooperation accelerated by the psychological impact of humanity's new place in the universe. Our admission to the Galactic Council was contentious. Thorne continued as the hologram displayed heated council debates. Many argued that our violent history made us too unpredictable, too dangerous. Ambassador Kalen shifted uncomfortably at this reminder of his own species' opposition to human membership. Yet paradoxically, it was precisely our martial history that eventually secured our acceptance, Thorne said. The Council needed what we reluctantly offered: experience with conflict resolution through force when necessary, rapid response capabilities in crisis situations, and perhaps most importantly, an understanding of violence that most Council species lacked. The hologram showed human rapid response units dispatched to handle space piracy in the Cygnus sector, Earth diplomatic security forces protecting Council negotiations, human disaster relief operating in high-risk environments. We became the peacekeepers with the capacity for war, Thorne said. The soldiers in a community that had forgotten how to fight. The immune system of a body that had never before faced certain pathogens. The hologram showed a particularly telling scene. Human negotiators resolving a territorial dispute that had languished in council procedures for centuries, their approach direct and pragmatic compared to the elaborate diplomatic rituals that had failed. Our methods often shock council sensibilities, Thorne acknowledged. Where Xylosian protocol might require 17 cycles of ritualized dialogue before addressing a crisis, humans implement immediate containment measures. Where Volan tradition demands unanimity through exhaustive consensus building, humans sometimes act decisively with majority support when time is critical. The auditorium had grown utterly silent. Even the usual environmental systems seemed to have hushed. Scholar Lyra accused us of exaggerating our violent past, Thorne said, his voice solemn. I understand the impulse behind that accusation. The truth of human history is indeed statistically aberrant. A species that nearly destroyed itself repeatedly, then emerged to join a peaceful galactic community. It sounds like mythology rather than history. Yet this crucible forged what humanity has become, both our deepest flaws and our unique contributions to council space. The holographic display faded, returning the auditorium to its normal lighting. Thorne looked exhausted, the weight of his presentation evident in his stance. I do not ask you to admire our history, he concluded. Much of it shames us deeply. I ask only that you understand it as truth, a truth we ourselves struggle to reconcile with who we wish to become. The session ended in subdued discussion. As attendees filtered out, many cast thoughtful glances toward both Professor Thorne and Scholar Lyra. Ambassador Kalen engaged in hushed conversation with Captain Rostova, their previous antagonism temporarily set aside. Zen moved quickly to file what would clearly be a controversial report. Lyra remained seated long after most had departed. Eventually, she approached Thorne as he gathered his materials. Professor, she began, her melodic voice hesitant, I must apologize for my interruption. It was academically inappropriate and personally discourteous. Thorne looked up, studying her troubled expression. You raise valid questions that deserved addressing. The scientific mind should always challenge statistical anomalies. But I was wrong, she said softly, not in questioning, but in my presumptions. I assumed your history must be exaggerated because I could not imagine any sentient species surviving such self-destructive tendencies. It's a reasonable assumption, Thorne acknowledged. We ourselves can scarcely believe what we've survived. They walked together toward the observation deck, where Earth hung visible in the distance, a blue marble wreathed in the lights of orbital stations. I still cannot comprehend how your species endured, Lyra admitted. gazing at the planet. The psychological impact alone of living under constant threat of annihilation. It marked us, Thorne said, unconsciously touching a faded scar on his forearm, a relic from his youth during the last resource wars. Those who lived through the final nuclear standoffs, like my parents, never fully recovered from the fear. Even those of us born after carry the cultural memory. And yet you joined galactic society not as conquerors, but as contributors, Lyra observed. We had seen the precipice, Thorne replied. We had no desire to return to it. Finding others among the stars, peaceful, advanced civilizations, offered hope that there might be another way forward. Lyra considered this. The Council debates your methods still. When human security forces engaged those pirates in the Cygnus sector without awaiting final authorization, lives were saved, Thorne said firmly, including Xylosian lives. Yes, Lyra acknowledged, though the violation of procedural norms caused considerable distress. A difference in perspective, Thorne suggested. To Xylosians, proper procedure represents the foundation of civilization. To humans, faced with immediate threats, procedure sometimes represents an unaffordable luxury. They stood in silence for a moment, watching distant ships dock at the station. I've been researching the current situation in the Antarian Drift, Lyra said carefully. The unusual radiation patterns, the missing exploration vessels. Thorne tensed slightly. The Council has classified those reports. Yes, but academic clearance provides certain access, Lyra countered. What interests me is how quickly human military vessels were dispatched to the region, well before the Council reached consensus on an investigative approach. Precautionary positioning, Thorne said diplomatically, or preparation for conflict based on pattern recognition from your violent history, Lyra suggested. You see threats where we see anomalies because your evolutionary background trained you to identify danger first. Thorne didn't deny it. And if those patterns prove correct, then the Council may once again find itself grateful for humanity's paranoia, Lyra admitted. Though we would never phrase it that way in formal proceedings. Zen approached them, environmental suit humming with its life support functions. Professor Thorne, Scholar Lyra, my report on today's session has generated unprecedented interest. Requests for follow-up are flooding in from across Council space. What angle did you take? Thorne asked warily. Violent history, humanity's burden and gift, Zen replied. I explored how your species' unique evolutionary path created both terrible destructive capacity and exceptional crisis response capabilities. Lyra's color shifted slightly, indicating surprise. Rather nuanced from mainstream networks. Truth often demands nuance, Zen replied, appendages gesturing expressively. Besides, with tensions rising in the Antarian sector, many species are suddenly finding humanity's martial expertise less disturbing than they once did. After Zen departed, Lyra turned back to Thorne. I cannot say I approve of or forgive what your species has done to itself and others throughout your history, she said carefully. The Holocaust simulation alone will give me sleep disturbances for cycles to come. We don't seek forgiveness, Thorne replied quietly. We seek understanding, and perhaps the opportunity to ensure such chapters never repeat for any species. I will be redirecting my research, Lyra decided. A comparative study of crisis response methodologies across species, with particular attention to human approaches. There may be adaptations possible that preserve Council values while incorporating certain human pragmatism. Thorne offered a small smile. The Council chambers will be thoroughly scandalized. Progress often disturbs before it improves, Lyra replied, unconsciously echoing human philosophical traditions she had once dismissed. As they parted ways, Captain Rostova approached Thorne, her formal military bearing slightly relaxed now that the public session had ended. Effective presentation, Professor, she said. Though Security Command might question the wisdom of displaying our full historical violence so graphically. They're not children, Captain, Thorne replied wearily. Treating our galactic neighbors like they can't handle historical truth only reinforces their perception of human condescension. Rostova nodded thoughtfully. The Antarean situation is escalating. Fleet deployments have been advanced by 6 weeks. Based on the radiation pattern analysis, that and a recovered fragment from the Xylosian exploration vessel, Rostova confirmed. Weapons technology we've never encountered. The Council still debates whether it was an attack or an accident. While we prepare for the worst, Thorne observed. It's what we do, Rostova said simply. Better to be paranoid and alive than optimistic and extinct. Our history taught us that much, at least. They watched as Lyra joined a group of her fellow Xylosians across the concourse, already engaged in animated discussion. She'll never fully understand us, Rostova remarked. She doesn't need to, Thorne replied. She just needs to recognize that our truth, however horrific, is real, and perhaps that our scars, however ugly, might still serve a purpose in this beautiful, fragile piece they've built. Rostova's communication device signaled. She checked it, her expression tightening. Another missing vessel in the Antarean sector. Council-sanctioned research mission. They'll debate for weeks, Thorne predicted. We'll be there in 3 days, Rostova countered. Full battle group. As she departed, Thorne remained at the viewport, watching Earth rotate slowly in the distance. Humanity's cradle, humanity's crucible, the planet that had nearly destroyed them, yet forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that understood peace precisely because they had mastered war. In his reflection on the transparent aluminum viewport, Thorne could almost see the generations behind him. The soldiers and survivors, the victims and victors, the long blood-soaked path that had somehow led here to the stars. He wondered, not for the first time, whether humanity's violent history was a curse or, in the face of whatever waited in the Antarean drift, an unexpected blessing. The station's ambient lighting shifted to evening cycle. In the galactic calendar used by Council species, it was officially designated as a day of harmony and reflection. In the old Earth calendar, few still observed. It was the anniversary of Hiroshima. Some wounds never fully healed. Some truths remained jagged no matter how carefully handled. But as scholar Lyra had begun to recognize, perhaps that was precisely what made them valuable. 3 days later, when the unknown vessels emerged from the Antarean drift in attack formation, humanity would demonstrate once again that understanding violence was not the same as loving it, but it might be exactly what the peaceful galaxy needed to survive. The oldest human military maxim echoed in Thorne's mind as he finally turned from the viewport, si vis pacem, para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. The galaxy was about to understand humanity much better indeed.